Hello, I'm Wendy Myers of MyersDetox.com. Welcome to the Myers Detox Podcast. Today we have Carla Atherton on the show to talk about the role of toxins in childhood chronic illness. And she's also the host of the Childhood Health Summit coming up very, very soon. And I wanted to, do this podcast to talk about why so many children today are being diagnosed with ADHD and POTS and autism. So many children have allergies and asthma. We talk about the role of vaccines and what role they play in the underlying root cause of some of these childhood illnesses, and what you can do about it, and how the whole family really needs to be treated, not just the child. So we cover all these topics and more in today's show. I know that so many of you listening to this podcast are looking for solutions, looking to underlying root causes of why you have vague symptoms like fatigue and brain fog or even a diagnosis. And I assure you that heavy metals and chemicals are big underlying root causes or outright exacerbating your health issues. So I've created a quiz. You can find it at heavymetalsquiz.com. And I created this because I wanted to give you a tool where you could determine your levels of heavy metals in your body based on some lifestyle questions. And after you take the quiz, I give you some solutions and tips about what the next steps would be. So go to heavymetalsquiz.com and take the quiz. Our guest today, Carla Atherton, MAFTN and ITN, is the director of the Health Family Formula, host of the Children's Health Summit, family health and nutrition coach, writer and editor, researcher, curriculum developer, publisher, workshop leader, yoga instructor, health revolutionary, and children's health advocate. Carla is an acreage living mother of three and specializes in family health with a focus on functional, holistic, natural health and wellness, with specific interest in chronic childhood illness, functional neurology, digestive health, the science of mind-body practices, stress reduction, autoimmunity, and immunology. Carla coaches families to overcome health challenges using the principles of functional health and lifestyle medicine. You can learn more about her at healthyfamilyformula.com. Carla, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So you have spent the last 7 years becoming an expert in family wellness, aiming to revolutionize family health. So what started you on this mission?
Well, it's a long story, but to make it a little shorter, it's like kind of like everybody, it seems that everybody who starts in this kind of space and really getting focused on health and wellness and finding alternative, answers to things that they really weren't questioning before. It's like my own experience with health. So my daughter, well, actually, I had some health issues before, and I was already looking into things, a little bit differently, like, I wonder why I have weird digestion, and I wonder why I'm not feeling so great, and wonder why I gained 35 pounds at the age of 35 when I was never really a heavy set person. I got small bones. That's a lot of weight, right? For a person my size. So I was kind of exploring those things, like, why is this chronic thing not going away? Like, why can't I actually deal with this or handle that? And that was pretty much like the very tip of the iceberg of what we experienced through the years after that. But then my daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And she was 11 at the time, which is kind of the time to be diagnosed. And, it seems that a lot of kids, end up, developing type 1 diabetes at that time of their lives. And so that really turned everything on its head. Like that's when so I went to the hospital. Okay, so this is us. I'm kind of noticing these strange things happening in my daughter. She's kind of thirsty. She's got kind of funny vision. She's, saying, Mom, like she has to pee a lot. And those are like classic 3 signs of having, type 1. And, so I was like, that sounds like sugar. Like that I don't like that. So I actually made her an appointment, and the doctor kind of, said, why are, what's the, don't panic about stuff. And I'm like, I'm not, gave me crap for not bringing, for bringing food, but not feeding her. So I fasted her because I knew we needed to check her sugar. And but I had this bag of food right beside my feet. And I'm like, well, I just want to make sure that we can do this test now. I'm not coming back tomorrow. So I should do it tomorrow. We did it. She calls me later that evening and said, Carla, she has diabetes. And I was like, okay. So what I do with that kind of I guess information, or that kind of, like, or and then with her diagnosis, what I do is I often I get started. Like I just, my feet, hit the ground running, and I look into stuff and I read everything I can possibly read about it. And I really got schooled in what I did not have any idea about before. All I had was instinct really to go by, and my own experience so far with what wasn't working and what might work, right? So we went to the hospital. I was asking about glycemic index, to the endocrinologist, like what does that have to do with controlling blood sugars? And he said nothing. And so when he said that, I went, we're on our own.
Yeah.
I had to find, I don't think that's true. So I think we're going to have to find somebody who knows something about this. So that's when my break from conventional medicine kind of really came and expanded into an understanding of the body as a functional, like in the lens of functional medicine, functional wellness, lifestyle interventions, and how powerful the concepts are, and how powerful the therapies, the daily lifestyle, all that stuff that comes along with it. How powerful that is for healing and for prevention, in the first place, because I really realized what might have caused all of this to happen to my, 11-year-old daughter, who's now 18, and then what to do about it. So root cause resolution, those sorts of things became really, I really started to understand those things. So that's what started me on the mission. What I've done since has been something I never would have thought, that I didn't like, I'm not 15 years old going, I think I'm going to be like a family health coach when I get to, I think I'm, I mean, there's not even close. I mean, what is that? Right. So, so that's kind of what started me on this mission.
Yeah, and so there's a lot missing in regards to, childcare in the conventional medical space. So can you talk about what some of those things are? Like what are we not getting in regards to taking care of our children in the mainstream medical space?
Yeah, I think one of the worst things, and thank you for asking me that, because then I can sort of stand up here in my soapbox and tell everybody what I think. But, so I think one of the worst things, and one of the most disservices that we give to parents, is that they're told it's permanent, right? Like that it's like something happened, and that's actually a lot of the case, that we had a lot of those responses from the people in our environment, like from doctors and from family and from well-wishing people, that, oh, I'm so sorry, like that this, that's happened to you, right? And it's permanent, and it's something that we can't do anything about. Well, I soon learned that that is not true, that there is a ton you can do, actually, like so much more than what anybody, even comes close to understanding. And that we're missing the opportunity, right? If we're just told that there's nothing we can do that's permanent, the hope, right, that keeps people seeking, that keeps them motivated, that keeps them curious, asking questions, having some sort of sense of innovation that will, create change. Because if we're told that this is it, that's what you get, you dealt this deck of cards, no, I'm reshuffling those cards. I'm not. That's not an answer for me. And also that we're told it's normal, right? Like this is a normal thing, that things just happen. And if we're not talking about like type 1 diabetes, if we're talking about any other chronic condition that children may encounter, and they're encountering those conditions more and more all the time, like the numbers are just skyrocketing. But we are like lobsters in a pot, thinking that it's normal, right? Because everybody else is sick. This is pretty normal for kids to suffer from anxiety and depression now, like especially teenagers. It's like, they're just going through this phase, and no, that's not normal, and they're not actually growing out of it. That's not a normal thing to happen, or it's not normal to have chronic eczema or acne. It's not normal to or it shouldn't be. It might be the norm, but it's not normal. It's not healthy, right? So all of these things that were kind of like, I mean, lots of kids with ADHD diagnoses or autism, this has become something that's just like common and everyday. But that, I think that's a real disservice. That I don't think that we need to be like, chastising people or anything like that, but we need to understand this is not okay. And that so we really need to pay attention to the things that's what's happening basically. So what that does is that it stops us from questioning or improving and living our best lives, right? Improving because, our families can really, and our children can really have a lot of suffering unnecessarily, right? Some things you can't fix all the way. Some things are hard, but you can definitely improve to a point where it's not a constant state of suffering unnecessarily.
Yeah, and that's one thing that's so important that I love that
Yeah.
you said is that if your child gets a diagnosis, don't just
Yep.
and the doctor says, "Oh, there's nothing that can be done."
Yep.
BS. There is always something that can be done. For me, I don't ever take no for an answer. I'm like, there is always a workaround. There is always something you can do. Because my daughter, Winter, was diagnosed with autism at just before her third birthday. And then there's some doctors out there that would say, oh, there's that's a lifetime diagnosis. And I didn't get that messaging, but I know a lot of people do. And and my daughter is normal today because of all the interventions and everything that I had to do to be proactive. So I understand that kind of devastating emotional impact that can come with a childhood, illness diagnosis or a psychiatric diagnosis like autism. So let's talk a little bit about toxicity and how toxicity relates and is contributing to childhood chronic illness.
Okay, well, you know what? I just want to say one other thing about you talking about diagnosis, because I identify with you as another mom, and other parents that are listening to this right now, is that the diagnosis for me wasn't the devastating part, because I knew instinctually, I knew that wasn't it, and that like we can find the answers and we can defy the odds or whatever you want to call it, but there was a lots we could do, and I never feel like I'm ever stuck, because knowledge is power. Empowerment is even better, right? You empower yourself with knowledge. And then, find ways to do something about a situation that's just, it does, like, again, unnecessarily, kind of chronically plaguing you. But then, what I found was the most devastating, and even continually so. I mean, we had many, many challenges since, and I've other family members, friends, clients that I work with. And so I think what's more devastating than the actual diagnosis is the attitude around the environment that we need to live in. Our children they're constantly told the opposite of what their moms, who are like these, like, no, we can do this, we can do this. They're constantly being told that they can't. I mean, we've had that encounter so many times, and it's not just like in a doctor's office or, I'm not dogging on that. But I'm saying, like, in the environment and like the stuff we see in the media and like, how we understand this whole medicalized model of health, which is completely missing the point, and it's negligent, really. I think it was what it is. So, so I just wanted to say that wasn't a diagnosis that I personally found devastating, which it can be for sure. I mean, it is, if you don't think there's anything you could do about it, or to improve, or to be, to have a good life, But it was more so the attitudes that surrounded that diagnosis that I found the most, crippling for my own children.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's just it's sad when I think people almost get this learned helplessness when they're told that there's nothing that can be done or what have you. When don't be limited by the toolbox of your mainstream medical doctor. Don't be limited by their limited knowledge set. Because that's why you need to have a team of practitioners around you, maybe a nutritionist, someone working on toxicity who's an expert in that, someone who knows about something else. Maybe they specialize in your child's diagnosis. You need to be never looking at one person to having all the answers to solve your issues or problems or health issues. It takes a village to address these things. And so I just caution people to be wary and get second opinions and get other alternative opinions and alternative ways of addressing health issues, because knowledge is power, like you said.
Yep, for sure. So I just want to quickly reiterate like a couple of points there, and then we'll move right into this toxicity conversation. A couple other things I just want to make sure that it's really clear. Like what I think about that is blaming, what's blaming biology rather than looking at the interplay between epigenetics and environment, right? So we're missing proper diagnoses and root cause resolution. We're missing really what's actually happened with those kids to get to the proper so sometimes someone will be diagnosed with ADHD, but what is that really? Like, what is the ADHD? I mean, it could be a nutritional deficiency, it could be a toxicity, which quite often it is, and it might not be the toxicity you might be thinking. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a chemical. It could be like EMF toxicity, right? So so those sorts of things, making sure that we're understanding that. We're also missing that what we were talking about, like the collaboration with healthcare professionals. We need, like you were just saying, we need a team. We need a collaborative team, though, not with the parent as the quarterback. Like, they might not be the one that makes all the play calls, and they might not be necessarily the coach, but they're definitely that key player that makes everything happen. They make everything happen. And so we're missing that empowerment that people need to feel. And we've kind of lost that, relying on sort of like synthetic, not really real systems and ways of thinking that that strip us away from our own power. I mean, really, parents are the ones that are actually doing this work with their kids, and they need to trust themselves more, I think. And also the nature of health, right? Like, literally and figuratively, like, what is natural about health? We need to kind of return to that nature of health, and also a shift in the view of how we view health as well. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, so thanks for indulging me there. Okay, so your other question.
Toxicity.
Okay.
I want to talk about toxicity.
You do.
So let's readdress this. What role do toxins play in childhood illness? I mean, I know that it's a huge, huge, huge role. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think for sure in any chronic illness, and especially children too, it is definitely like either you're toxic or you're deficient, right? So what is it and toxicities can cause deficiencies, and deficiencies can allow for toxicities. So it's this whole interplay, right? And I think that there are like categories of toxicity that we really need to pay attention to, and they're not all only physiological, or biological. So I mean, of course, we have chemicals, and namely glyphosate. Glyphosate is being like talked about in these circles, like some people like Stephanie Seneff are just like jumping up and down, trying to get people's attention and discussing this whole issue of glyphosate and how it's like devastating the microbiome, creating all kinds of problems with the chemical processes in the body that's leading to high inflammatory cascades and autoimmunity, and like just all kinds of damage to the cell, cancers, so you name it, glyphosate has a hand, and we are just like spraying it like it's like, I don't know what. I mean, I don't understand. Like, it's completely reckless. So I think chemicals for sure are leading the pack. We don't know what chemicals do. So it's like, okay, this one seems benign and this one's benign, but you put them together, we have no idea what that is doing to the human body. So chemicals are definitely on the top of the list there. Heavy metals, of course, you did like a summit on heavy metals. Like, you get a zillion people talking about this in a way more than I do, but I'm just going to give this mention because that is another issue with the development of childhood chronic illness. And kids are like, really highly exposed, if you're talking dental work, or if you're talking about vaccinations, if you're talking about like, actually we're things, the soil, I mean, rain, things are like heavy metals are here to stay, and we need to be able to chelate, get them out of the body, not necessarily chelate, but, like move them out, recognize the sources. So heavy metals is another thing that will be toxic to children and create this whole inflammatory cascade leading to chronic illness. Toxins caused by pathogens. Okay, that's another category. We have viruses, bacteria, parasites, fungus, all of these things that our immune systems aren't really handling very well because of the assaults that we're getting from heavy metals and chemicals, and poor lifestyle habits, EMF exposure. So that's another huge category that we're not really, I mean, we're naturally, like in nature, we are going to encounter that. We're supposed to. We actually are supposed to have this commensal, like party in there, of all these different critters. We're supposed to have that, but like some of the ones that make the most mess and do the least cleanup and pollute the place and throw their garbage around, the unwanted guests are those ones that are actually starting to really take over. And they'll be, the helpers, the cleaners, those ones are getting kind of pushed out the door. So, or killed. And so I think that's one thing we really need to pay attention to is the immune system there. Toxic food and lifestyle habits. So industrialized food, what are we taking in? And a glyphosate, that's a pretty good way to introduce glyphosate into the body is to purchase our food that's not organic. And so, we have those sorts of things, and lifestyle habits. So no sleeping, no real rest. All of those things are really not very good exercise. Like if you're exercising, you're sweating. Those sorts of things are contributing as well in a big way. And then another thing, Wendy, I just wanted to mention too, is that those are all sort of like things we can ingest, take in. They kind of relate to biochemical reactions and hormones and neurochemicals and all that sort of thing. They will affect those things, right? But we're also talking about other things that affect the central nervous system that will actually become toxic, right? So, or allow toxins to sort of take hold, or, so they are toxic in and of themselves. So the mental and emotional environments that we live in. I don't know about you, but I'm going to ask you this. Do you feel like sometimes if you're around, I think I'm a really empathetic person. So I really absorb a lot of the energy around me. And so if I'm in the city or something, I live in the country, but I'm in the city a lot, grew up in the city, and I feel this energy that is just like, I don't even know how to explain it. And so it really affects my psyche. And then it's really hard to actually feel good and to feel like on a healing path. It actually makes people sick.
Yeah.
This whole like an emotional and mental toxic environment. It makes people sick, literally. And so, those sorts of things, toxic peer groups and social situations, and, our culture is actually conducive to being, it can be very toxic because, paying attention to things like, like the biggest celebrities or these tragedies all over the world, and like the spin in media and stuff like that, or social media for children and youth, those sorts of things can be very toxic. So our culture is actually can be quite toxic to our children as well.
Yeah, yeah, and so I really like that you mentioned that because I think so many people don't really look at their environment or the energy around them and how it's affecting them. And some people they're incredibly empathic and are dramatically affected by people or their environment or EMF as well. And so tell us a little bit about vaccines and how vaccines contribute to childhood chronic illness.
Yeah, I think they are a major player. I have, things that I consider usual suspects for the onset of chronic illness in children and youth. And so vaccines is definitely part of that picture, and actually quite a large part, because they can affect all of the things actually that I've talked about, that we were talking about before in this whole interview. So I think that parents really need to get really well educated when they're making these decisions, not get swayed by any sort of like scare tactics or anything. Like really go by the facts. Like, is my child at risk? What kinds of things am I concerned about? What could I, and then if you're considering something like a vaccination, what am I actually doing? Like, what am I injecting into my child? What could the consequences be for that injection? And again, is it necessary? So I just advise parents that I work with to be extremely cautious. Myself, in our experience, I did vaccinate when my children were younger, but that's because I didn't know any of the stuff I know now. And I stopped at a very early age because I wasn't going to do that anymore. Like I learned too much, and I was just like, no, the risks outweigh the benefits high, like very exponentially. So So I advise caution. I advise getting really well educated, not by studies that are paid for by pharmaceutical companies, but by actual, evidence, and also anecdotal evidence. I mean, I actually really put a lot of value into parent testimonials and saying, look, like my kid was fine until this happened. I put a lot of stock into that because it's those moms and dads that are actually reporting the truth of what's going on behind the scenes and what actually happens to people, not just this theoretical idea of what we should and shouldn't do, but what is actually happening. So I advise extreme caution with the topic of vaccinations. Also, I think we need to really understand, how early kids are being vaccinated. Do we really need to vaccinate a 2-month-old baby that should have immunity from their own parent? Being born a vaginal birth, or having being breastfed. Those are two very protective measures for newborn babies, and actually all the way through to when that child is no longer being breastfed, and also even into the future. That part of life is really where we establish our immune system. So those beginnings are really where we need to focus. So we have all kinds of things. So if we're talking about toxicity, we have adjuvants, mercury, everybody knows about this now, right? All these metals that are coming into the body, also, viruses that are kind of hitching a ride as well. We don't really want to be injecting that into the body because of the detrimental effects that they have and creating chronic illness. And I really feel that was part of my own daughter's picture. Although she didn't just get diabetes right away. I mean, a lot of children have, end up, autistic after, inject like a vaccination. And, parents are like, they were fine and then they weren't fine. And so it didn't happen that way for us, but she had eczema. She had, all these different little signs that something was going on under the surface that I didn't really think was a big deal. Like I was saying, lobster in the pot, I didn't really think that it was a big deal, but that chronic kind of illness, that chronic condition that shouldn't actually really keep going and going was there right from then. And I also think, there's a combination of things that happen there. But, so we need to understand what is actually in these vaccines. Do we really want to be injecting that straight into the bloodstream of little children? And at the rate that we're doing it right now, stacked on stacked, can our immune system, those children's immune system really handle that? And then what's going on after the fact, when that immune system just says, look, this is I've had it, so, I mean, the necessity again, I have Dr. Paul Thomas gives a really good rundown about the necessity of certain vaccines. And he's a little more, it's a little different than my view about vaccines, but he gives a really good discussion about, what we're doing when we actually injected vaccines and which ones are actually maybe worth considering. Most of them aren't, by the way. Most of them actually are not worth considering. And then he says, well, these ones might be worth looking into. Like the HPV vaccine, for instance, kids are being very damaged by it. And we're really questioning, first, is it, does it work? And second, does it actually, are they necessary? I mean, is that necessary to give, these 13-year-old kids a HPV vaccine? And then also not really understanding a child's epigenetic, makeup. So what is it? Do they have certain SNPs, that may actually make them, not being able to detoxify properly, that make these vaccines much more dangerous for children who have these particular genetic SNPs, and also their status of their gut health. So we're not looking into that before actually saying, yeah, sure, everybody should get this. But you've got a kid with a leaky gut who has these predispositions to not be able to detoxify well. They don't make glutathione well. And you've got a recipe for disaster. Yeah. So, and then we're combining it with Tylenol, right? Tylenol. So Tylenol in conjunction with vaccinations has actually been shown to create these sorts of chronic illness, just this onset that happens right away after a vaccination. So that's another, and Tylenol actually tends to deplete the body of specific vitamins and nutrients, minerals as well. So B6 in particular, B vitamins, Tylenol will actually deplete the body of that particular vitamin. And B vitamins are like essential for so many different processes in the body that we just, being deficient in that, not being able to detoxify, not be able to produce the antioxidants we need, like major antioxidant, glutathione, leaky gut, that's causing all kinds of reactivity and inflammation. We have, again, a recipe for disaster. So I think that, and also not to mention what we don't know, with DNA changes, what are we doing to our actual, like, the future children that are being born from children of vaccinated people. I mean, we have no clue what's going on there. We won't know for quite some time. And also, I think that, Wendy, there are safer ways. Like, I think that, like I said before, natural childbirth and breastfeeding actually give that baby that immune system that they need. And also having viruses and bacteria and, like, all those things that, we think are bad actually aren't necessarily bad. Like, we know that measles actually are protective. So when your child gets measles and they go through kind of that sick, and nobody wants their children to be sick, but if they have a robust immune system and a good healthy gut, they actually come through those illnesses much more equipped to deal with every other assault they get along the way. So they're not using that sort of crutch of having, a vaccination to do that for them. Their own immune system is being educated by the various pathogens that they're encountering in their environment. And we need that. So that will actually lend us a much more robust immune system in the future. So we have, breastfeeding, natural childbirth, good nutrition, recognizing that, like, the health of the microbiome is major. And also homeoprophylaxis, which is a homeopathic method of educating the immune system as well. So I just think that there are safer ways, less toxic. I mean, none of those are toxic. Those are actually beneficial. And so, yeah, word of caution, parents, just, pay attention to what you're introducing into those to your child's body, because even the safer ways are actually protective, and they're actually ways to actually prevent chronic illness as well as reverse it.
Yes. So what do you think it's important for, like, the entire family and not just the child to be addressed? It's important to work with the entire family unit when a child has chronic illness.
Yeah, well, I actually think it's essential. If you've ever seen, a family, I mean, I'm sure you do this all the time, but you see a family who's been devastated by, a diagnosis, or it's not easy. Like, there's nothing about this that's easy. The relearning, even if you feel it, even the most empowered parent feels like, I don't want to do this sometimes, right? Like, this, I don't want my child to suffer. I don't want to go through this stuff. It's tough. And then, so, I mean, the divorce rate is high. The discontent in the homes is high, and you actually can't really heal very easily from a chronic illness if you have stress. So, and it's not just like this feeling of stress and this, like, I don't want to, can't communicate or connect with my parents because there's so much stress involved. It's not just that. It's actually the central nervous system and the high cortisol and, all those things that are contributing to the disease process. So that's really important to deal with family relationships. And so if you're doing it all together, that's strengthening that family, the relationship. And whatever that family looks like, might be like one parent and kids, might be one parent, one kid, could be two parents, could be grandparents, whatever that family unit is, zillions of kids, right? Like, it doesn't matter what that is, but the unit, the people that are living together as a family, to do it together, I think is really, it's essential, and because that child who is ill, that one, or two or whatever, that child is not singled out. They don't feel different. They don't feel odd. This is just something we all do to maintain our health. They're not, the sick kid, they're not, because that takes away all of their power in their own healing process. And we need them to feel empowered as well. So, not the sick kid. And the family is the best support system. They could be the worst, right? If you're falling apart, that could be the hardest thing in somebody's life, is when you have a family that's really has difficult relationships, not working together, someone singled out, black sheep of the family, like, so-and-so doesn't have to do the dishes. Why didn't, all that strife that's just like wears down on you, thing after thing after thing. Like, we can really mitigate some of those, that fallout, right? And not singling certain people out. So, but our family support system can be the best support. It could be, our solace. It could be where those kids actually come to for the advice of their parents or their siblings and the support, rather than going out there where there's a lot of crap and a lot of stuff to deal with that is not beneficial for them. It's not serving them. It's not serving them to be, all their friends are going to McDonald's, or it's not serving them or to even feel like they're deprived of that. So if they have this really good support system, this is the way we do it. This is the way I would have been taught. It's so much easier to deal with any sort of illness. So, and it elevates the health of everybody, right? And we create a less toxic, more healing space for our families to heal. And so when I coach people, I'm looking at mom, I'm looking at dad, and those are actually the first two people, or whoever's the main caregiver. Those are the people actually that really need the support of, like, let's say you're working with a family health coach or healthcare providers. Those are the people that need the most support, and their kids just get better, and it shakes out in the wash. Like, if the parents are getting better, those kids are getting better. So that's why I think a family approach is really, really important. And I think the family gets lost in the shuffle quite often. We focus on the sick person, and we forget that everybody in that family is like, it's like a symbiotic relationship. And if one person is not well, the rest of them aren't really doing well either. And if other people are doing well, a rising tide lifts all boats. So that's why I really focus on the family.
You talk about all these topics and more in your upcoming summit, the Children's Health Summit for Preventing and Reversing Childhood Chronic Illness. And I talked on the summit as well about toxicity. But can you tell us about, what someone could expect with the summit and where they can sign up and register for it?
Yeah, for sure. Well, okay. So if you go to childrenshealthsummit.com, that's where you can find us, and they'll have a lineup of the speakers. We have, like, so far, and actually I have a couple latecomers too, 54 speakers. It's
Wow.
insane. It is the best. And I promise to deliver the biggest family health event of the year, and I delivered. I'm telling you, and I don't mean just me. I mean, all of these people who are speaking is just phenomenal. We talk about everything from ADHD, autism, asthma, atopic conditions, autoimmunity, GI distress, mood and mental health issues, and also childhood cancer. I just wrapped up an interview with Dr. Naisha Winters about childhood cancer. We tackle it all because, and then what we do is we help people to first understand the problems, then dig into some of the details, and then what do we do about it, right? We want people to come away from this summit with some real concrete answers. So I'm really proud of it. I can't wait for it. We launch May 13th. So, but you can go head on over to our Children's Health Summit.com and get signed up to receive the emails that'll give you the links to all the talks. And I really hope to see you there.
Yeah, and so you also have a program where you teach people to become family health coaches. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, and that kind of was born out of my discontent. I think sometimes we just need something to bug us a little bit to get, keep us going on that hero's journey, yeah. So, that kind of bugged me, our experience. I'll just put that mildly, kind of bugged me, my experience I had with my daughter. And I felt like, well, what are we missing when we're trying to, support these parents to be empowered? And so I felt I took a bunch of different health coach training programs and trainings, and trained in functional medicine and all kinds of stuff, but it never addressed the family or what people can do. So it didn't address advocacy, it didn't address, how to find your support team. It didn't address, parents weren't even really taught the physiology, or the coaches weren't even taught that to really give their clients the best experience. I wasn't really interested in doling out supplements and just saying that's going to fix you, because it's not. It just isn't. There's no, so what I did was I put together a program that did this paradigm shift, right? In the very beginning of the program, we talk a lot about, the medicalization of health, and then shifting into this natural state of health that we should have. This shouldn't be an anomaly to feel good. We should all feel good and be rarely sick. That's actually kind of how it needs to be, or should be. And then we go through all of the physiology, we go through all of the psychology, we go through trauma, we go through central nervous system, we go through all the usual suspects that cause disease, and then we go through all of the pillars of how to actually reverse, prevent, help our clients. And then we talk about those issues with coaching as well. So, and coaching the whole family, not just the individual, because it's very different to coach an individual and then also coach a family and that has kids and this variable and that variable, like, or grandparents, or like all these things that we need to take into account. So I wanted to train people to support people like me who really could have used that at the very beginning and saved myself 8 years of like trying to figure it all out for myself, and really making headway right away with somebody who knows what they're doing, how to guide you in the decisions that you need to make so that you can actually nip this whole thing in the bud.
Well, Carla, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your insight on this topic, as you just interviewed some of the world's foremost experts on childhood health care. And, this is so important because so many children today are on medications, they have allergies, they have asthma.
Yep.
We just have a rash of childhood illness that we just didn't exist even, 20, 30 years ago. And so you talk about some of those issues as to why, and a lot of solutions on the Childhood Health Summit. So thanks for coming on. And everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Myers Detox podcast, where every week we talk about issues surrounding heavy metal and chemical toxicity, health issues that are caused by these toxins, and solutions as well. So thanks for tuning in every week. And it's such a blessing to be able to serve you and help answer all of your pressing health questions. So I'll talk to you next week.